This video is brought to you by Trust Dice. Trust Dice is one of the largest online crypto casinos that offers a wide variety of options from table game favorites like blackjack, roulette, and many more games. They also have an awesome sports betting section, and that's great, especially considering football season is here and basketball season is right around the corner, so you know where I'm putting my crypto when it's time to game. You can place bets for other sports as well, including tennis, boxing, MMA, hockey, golf. Listen, they got it all. But you got to remember, gambling is a risk. Don't gamble with money you can't afford to lose. And if you do choose to participate, make sure you do so responsibly and understand success is not guaranteed. Make sure you guys check out the links at the top of the description box down below. And thank you, Trust Dice, for sponsoring this video. Life is a mystery sometimes, and the wildest things seem to happen to the best people. We all know the story of LeVertical James and LeCross James, but in order to understand this story, we have to take it back a step further to when LeCross was in high school. Now, if you can remember correctly, LeCross is the half brother of LeVertical James, and if you didn't know, LeVertical and LeCross was born in the same year by two different women. LeGoat James decided to marry LeVertical James's mom, but LeCross was always around, and even though LeCross's mom could have been in a better situation financially, she didn't want any money from LeGoat, so LeCross didn't grow up the same way LeVertical did. Also, if you want to see that story in full, make sure you go check out the LeCross James story on NBA 2K20. The playlist link will be in the description. But back to this story. You see, when LeCross was in high school, he met this girl, Maria. They fell in love, blah, blah, blah. You get it. Well, unfortunately for LeCross, her dad didn't like him. He thought LeCross was all trouble, and let's keep it a bean. LeCross was all trouble, but her dad wasn't going for it. He pretty much told her she was forbidden to see LeCross ever again, but by then it was too late. That seed had already been planted, if you know what I'm saying. But of course, things get crazier because that summer, LeCross was crushed to find out that the love of his life, Maria, was moving away. Her dad was getting a promotion on his job and they had to move immediately. LeCross barely got to say goodbye. As a matter of fact, by the time he found out, he was too late. He got there just in time to see the U-Haul truck leave. He was devastated. Let's fast forward, and Maria came to the realization that she in fact was pregnant, and her dad was pissed. Maria and her father, they knew who the father of that child was, but Maria's dad was not going to let his daughter communicate with LeCross at all. He was controlling, but in his mind, he thought he was doing what was best for her and didn't realize that he was really hurting the situation instead. Of course, LeCross had no idea that he was a father because he was too busy figuring out what college he wanted to go to with the hopes of going to the NBA. Fast forward 13 years from that moment, and LeCross James is at the peak of his career, and he gets a call that summer that would change his entire lookout on life. The call was awkward, as you can imagine, but it went something like this. Hey, LeCross, it's me, Maria. I've been waiting to make this call for 13 years. When I moved away, my dad wouldn't let me talk to you, and I was too afraid to try, but I need to let you know that I was pregnant and we have a son together. Hearing that, of course, threw LeCross way off. I mean, it was so random, and 13 years later, that's wild. And how did she even get his number? So many questions was running through LeCross's mind, but the main thing was the child his? In the best way possible, LeCross asked if there was any way that they could get a DNA test, and unfortunately, that's not what Maria wanted to hear. I guess she was looking for a more loving response, and that's how that conversation ended. But LeCross wasn't that type of guy. Knowing his history and how much love LeGoat showed to LeCross, even though he was technically the side chick's son, he had to make sure he was in that boy's life, especially if it was his son for sure. So that morning he called back and apologized, made some small talk, and invited Maria out to make sure what she said was true. And sure enough, it was true. LeCross James had a son, and for 13 plus years, he had no idea, but the boy idolized LeCross. Matter of fact, played basketball and wanted to be just like him. And Maria never told him who his father was. So imagine his surprise when he found out it was LeCross. The boy's name is Cato, meaning knowledgeable and wise. His mother's last name and his last name is Raul, with a Portuguese meaning versatile and strong defender. Life is a mystery sometimes, and the wildest things seem to happen to the best people. Let's fast forward 4 years that summer, and LeCross was ready to call his career off to invest all of his life into Cato, who he had just met 4 years ago. And sometimes life throws the wildest punches. Cato was in LA with LeCross like he did every summer ever since they found out that they were father and son. They loved each other and were like twins, tied at the hip. When one night LeCross got a call that would become one of the worst calls he ever received. It was about Maria. Unfortunately, the guy she was dating had too much to drink that night and was involved in a car accident. And while he survived, Maria in the passenger side didn't. She was pronounced dead on the scene, and LeCross was her emergency contact. This hit hard for LeCross because he knew it was going to crush Cato. Burying a parent is always hard. LeCross definitely could relate because he lost his mom to cancer, but this was different. Maria lost her life because of the actions of someone else, and Cato hated his mom's boyfriend for that, and LeCross didn't know how to handle it. He had so much rage and hate in his young heart, and there were no words that could calm him. The only way LeCross could get the pain to subside is through basketball, and that's how they spent most of their time on the court. LeCross thought it'd be a great idea to take Cato to a tattoo shop to get something that Cato could remember his mother by, and Cato loved the idea. He needed something that he could carry around with him no matter what that would remind him of Maria, because all he knew was her all of his life. Now, with Maria no longer with us, LeCross had full custody of Cato, and Cato would have to move to LA to live with LeCross for 1 year before he went off to college. Of course, Cato would be enrolled in the family school at Dexter Christian Academy, who had become a top-tier national school due to Cato's cousin, Ethan Lane, and his best friend, Justin Alexander. LeCross knew Cato needed to be on the court to deal with his anger, and Cato was ready to get his mind off of the pain. And Dexter Christian was more than happy to see another James family member come through those doors, and trust me, Cato was unlike any James family member we've ever seen. He was his grandfather reincarnated, and on top of that, he had the skills of his uncles and cousins. The world wasn't ready. Cato is a dog, trust me. Cato was a quiet guy. He really stayed to himself, didn't bother anybody, and didn't want to be bothered by anybody. Here at Dexter Christian, everybody knew who the James family members were by the way the teachers treated them, which led to other students feeling like there was some form of special treatment, and Cato hated the extra attention. And with the passing of his mom, the sympathy he was receiving made it all worse. It made him not want to be around those type of people, because he felt like if they didn't know his mom had passed away, or if they didn't know he was a part of the James family, they wouldn't treat him that way. So Cato often found himself skipping certain classes to avoid dealing with those type of people, which more than likely landed him in trouble. But on the court, Cato was making trouble for the opposite team. See what I was doing there? Yeah. Anyway, Cato was showing that he could channel his anger and really carry this average team while they traveled and played some tough competition. One of Cato's goals was to be the #1 center in his class. Also, he wanted to be the #1 player in his class on ESPN overall. And of course, his daddy told him what it was going to take to be that #1 player, which was essentially to beat all the better teams and beat the better centers. Cato was down for the challenge. Not only was he down for the challenge, but he was showing signs of greatness that most had never seen. It was going around that the last time they saw a big play like this was Cato's cousin, LeCross James, but even LeCross couldn't shoot the ball like Cato could. Cato was an all-around threat on both sides of the ball, and colleges were taking notice. And unlike the other younger generations of the James family, Cato was doing it off his talent and not just his name. So far, Cato was ranked top 10 in his class as far as centers go, and he was top 50 in the ESPN class overall. He definitely had a lot more to prove to the scouts, and he wanted to make his mom proud. And with that motivation, you know Cato was destined to do great things. But obviously there was a huge problem off the court, and that was Cato's attitude. As I mentioned earlier, Cato wanted to avoid all fake love from the teachers and the staff, but his way of avoiding it was to skip class, and it started to show in his grades. Cato was far from dumb, but Dexter Christian had to hold Cato to the same standards as every other athlete. The school, of course, had to notify LeCross, his dad, and let him know what was going on. And this was a tough one for LeCross because he didn't know how to handle the situation. And that's where you guys come in. Does LeCross discipline Cato, or does he let Cato slide? You let me know down in the comments, and remember, every action has an opposite and equal reaction. Luckily, you all decided that LeCross should discipline Cato, because if you didn't, the situation would more than likely have gotten worse. One thing about discipline is that it can come in any form. It doesn't always have to result in getting a whooping or being yelled at. Discipline really is about making the child accountable for their actions, and LeCross made sure that Cato was held accountable for his actions, and made sure that Cato went and talked to the teachers whose class he was skipping, and made sure he got the work done that he was missing to bring his grades back up to a respectable level. Now, on the court, it was looking like Cato's dreams were coming true as far as moving up in the rankings. Midway through the season, Cato was showing every game why he was the #1 center in his class and the #1 player in the country. With Dexter Christian playing a national basketball schedule, rankings tended to be more accurate for him, and the college scouts were rushing to offer Cato a scholarship to come and play for their school. And of course, you know, his dad, LeCross, was right there offering Cato a spot at his alma mater, USC. But this game in particular really got everyone around the globe watching Cato. The way he was scoring made him look like a man among boys. People knew that with the right unit around him, he was going to do even more than what he was doing already in high school. His ability to take over a game when the team needed it was making him an unstoppable force. It's funny to hype him up like this, but when you look at the score, you would think it would be a blowout. But honestly, if it wasn't for Cato stepping up when he did, it would be a blowout, except for Cato's team would be losing. But Cato had too much fight in him to take the L. Cato's team had been down in that game for a while until he made the right plays to put his team in a spot to compete. Fast forward, and it was all looking like things had fallen into place for Cato until his teammate fouled on a three-point shot with a 3-point lead, and Cato was heated. There's no way possible he just did that in a game that looked like it was already over. And during those free throws, Cato looked defeated, but he saw his dad, LeCross, in the crowd, who was reassuring him that it was going to be okay. And in that huddle, the coach told Cato to take that last shot and to believe in himself. Cato had done it. He had done something not everyone gets a chance to feel, and that's the impossible. He was a hero, but we always praise the heroes for saving us, but when the hero's in a tight spot, who saves them? While Cato was the quiet one, it seemed as if other people just couldn't stop talking about him. Well, one day Cato was headed to the bathroom in between classes when he heard a kid talking about him and his mom, and the conversation was very disrespectful. Cato was furious, of course, and trust me, what this kid was saying was wild. Even I would have had to have some words. Well, maybe not some words, but you know what I mean? I definitely would have had to have something to say to that kid when he came out of that restroom. But in this situation, I'll let you guys decide how this one pans out. Does Cato confront the kid disrespecting his mom, or does he walk away? You let me know down in the comments, and remember, every action has an opposite and equal reaction. So it seems as if the majority of everyone wanted Cato to either go to college or play overseas. These were great options for Cato to think on, but his dad wanted him to think more about which of the two options would ultimately prepare him for the goal, which was to make it to the NBA. What option would prepare him for the next step in his life? Both options had their pros and cons, and although Cato was young, this decision was going to be the toughest decision so far because it would either make him or break him. Either way, his that Lacrosse was going to be there for him every step of the way. But first step was the California State Championship game against Amari Bailey, Bronny, and Sierra Canyon. Amari and Bronny had carried this team all the way to this point, and at first things were not looking good for Cato and Dexter Christian. Still the #1 center in the nation, Cato was facing a nice challenge versus Sierra Canyon, but Dexter Christian was showing why they were there. Cato really had to depend on the team these last few games, and that was good for Cato because he wasn't going to be the best player on every team that he went to. So being able to trust his teammates was going to be crucial, especially at the next level. This game was very close, and Cato was looking to have a big game, putting up some great numbers, but so was Amari Bailey, who seemed virtually unstoppable. Both players were trying their best to keep their team's head above the water. Neither one of them wanted their team to get down by too much because they both knew that one slip up could cost them the game. Late in the fourth quarter, there was some mistakes made, and that was allowing Cato to catch fire. At this point, Cato had a triple-double and was looking like a pro playing pickup with high schoolers. His team was shooting the lights out, and Sierra Canyon had fallen to Dexter Christian Academy. Cato had led his team to a state championship, and he was looking to win nationals as well. Cato was the man that night, but he was going to have to turn into something crazier for nationals. He was going to have to become a beast. Now it was time for Cato to make his decision, and his family was waiting because whatever decision Cato was going to make, his family was going to move into action to make sure he was prepared for whatever he chose. So you let me know down in the comments, what do you think Cato chose, or where do you think he should go next? It's going to be either between college or overseas. This is going to be a good one.